On March 15th of the 44 BC year, Gaius Julius Caesar was assassinated during a Senate meeting held inside the Curia attached to the theatre of Pompeius Magnus. 2 days later, in the Temple of Tellus on Esquiline Hill, the Senate met to come to an agreement over Caesar's death. There, with a military presence surrounding the temple and intimidated by veiled threats from the consul Marcus Antonius, the Senate arrived at a compromise, so that all Caesar's laws, reforms, and governmental appointments would not be dismantled, which would anger the people as well as the legions. The Senate chose not to name Caesar as tyrant. For the murder of a Roman consul, dictator, Pontifex Maximus, and imperator, amnesty was extended to Caesar's assassins, who were now referred to as the Liberators. On March 20th, all of Rome turned out for the funeral of Rome's dictator in perpetuum. Though the eulogies would be delivered in the Forum Romaeum, as was customary for a state-sponsored funeral, Caesar's pyre was built on the Campus Martius near the remains of his daughter Julia. Because the day was not long enough to receive gifts of state and condolences from foreign dignitaries and clientele in the proper order of importance, all were instructed to bring their gifts to the Campus Martius by whatever road possible, as the funeral for Caesar was simply too large to conform to ceremonial tradition. On a golden and ivory funeral bier that was draped in purple and gold coverlets, Caesar's body was escorted into the Forum Romaeum, carried by veterans of his Gallic campaign, and led by his father-in-law Lucius Calpurnius Piso Caesoninus. Attached to the funeral bier was a pole, upon which hung the blood-stained toga and robe Caesar had worn when he was so brutally executed. As Piso Caesoninus led the bier forward, soldiers positioned throughout the Forum Romaeum and around the rostra for the protection of the speakers and the Senate began clashing swords against shields in a slow, purposeful, dirge-like rhythm. Beholding the body of Caesar and hearing the crashing of military swords, the people began to stir. Lamentations from the crowd arose and were mingled with periodic outbursts over the amnesty conferred on Caesar's killers. Although multiple speakers gave rousing eulogies on Caesar's behalf, the eulogy of Marcus Antonius was the defining moment. With heralds poised to echo his words to the thousands who had gathered, Marcus Antonius began by announcing that it was wrong for a funeral eulogy, in praise of so great a man as Caesar, to be delivered by a single man such as himself, rather than by his whole country. After making the point that it was first the Senate, but then the people of Rome who had seen fit to heap so many divine honors on Caesar, Antonius produced the compelling list of laws and reforms initiated by the dictator. "Regard my voice as being not mine," said Antonius, "but yours." He then recited the particulars, focusing on that legislation which had greatly benefited the lower classes and the legions. Following each reading, Antonius would pause and gesture to Caesar's mutilated body. He would highlight each reform Caesar had enacted in the interests of the people with a mournful gaze at Caesar's lifeless corpse. In noting the many honors given to Caesar, such as sacrosanct, benefactor, leader, inviolate, and father of the nation, Antonius motioned dramatically towards Caesar's fallen body as he remarked, "This is proof of his mercy," claiming that whomsoever shall take refuge with Caesar should be unharmed. Antonius affirmed that it was no victim who now sought refuge, but the sacrosanct and inviolate Caesar himself, who had not taken such honors by force like a despot, and indeed did not even ask for them. Antonius then continued by reading aloud the oath all had taken, which cursed those who failed to protect Caesar's life with all their might. Turning towards the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, Antonius raised his hands to the heavens, his voice thundering, "O Jupiter, for myself I am prepared to defend Caesar according to my oath and the terms of the curse I call down on myself. But since it is the view of my equals that what we decided is for the best, I pray it is for the best." When the members of the Senate, to whom Antonius's words were directed, began to protest, Antonius disarmed them, quickly claiming Caesar's death was the work of some spirit over that of any man. But Rome now needed to attend to the present. with the dangerous threat of being dragged back into another civil war, bringing with it the complete extinction of Rome's noble families. The future was now poised on the edge of a knife. Antonius then hitched up his robes, tied them about his waist, and enjoined the people, singing the customary hymns and dirges, "Let us conduct this sacrosanct person to join the blessed." Weeping, Antonius then began to sing of Caesar's miraculous birth, his many victories in battle, and of treasures and gold brought from far and wide to fill Rome's coffers, declaring that Caesar alone emerged victorious against all who did battle against him. Antonius finished by pronouncing Caesar the only person to avenge Rome for the invasion inflicted by the Gauls 300 years earlier. With hands lifted, and tears drowning his eyes, Antonius sang passionately Caesar's wondrous ascension into the heavens. Caught up in the emotion of his own words and the lamentations of the people, Marcus Antonius then grabbed the pole which displayed the roads befouled by Caesar's blood. Waving the pole back and forth to draw the eyes of the people to Caesar's garments, rent and torn asunder by daggers, Antonius fanned the flames of sentiment in the already impassioned crowd. The people could no longer excuse those who had sided with the Pompeians against Caesar, and justify their escaping punishment when they had been given military commands and governorships, only to betray Caesar. And what of Decimus Brutus? Caesar loved Brutus so much he had deemed him worthy of adoption, yet Brutus had dined with the dictator the night before, even knowing that, come the dawn, he would lead Caesar to his execution. The historian Appian tells us that as the crowd was in this state and near to violence, a wax effigy of Caesar, bearing all 23 of his stab wounds, was hoisted into the air by a mechanical device, which turned the effigy so that all could see the grievous deed done to their beloved Caesar. As the senators began exiting the funeral to slip into hiding, the actor hired to represent Caesar, quoting a line from Homer, cried out as if in Caesar's voice, "Saved I these men, that they might murder me." Sublimely outraged, the mob had reached its breaking point. The crowd heaved forward and took hold of Caesar's corpse. Dragging it from its bier, the mob then raced up Clivus Capitolinus towards the temple of Jupiter Octavius Maximus, where they meant to cremate Caesar's corpse in the house of Rome's father god. But the people were fought off by the legions Lepidus had stationed around the temple. Still carrying Caesar's corpse, the crowd then raced back to the Forum Romanum, where they began building their own makeshift funeral pyre for Caesar. As the frenzied mob carted Caesar's corpse hither and yon, groups of people broke off into smaller bands. Some raced to the Curia where Caesar had been stabbed and set the building on fire. Others began hunting down Caesar's assassins throughout the city. Throngs of agitated citizens assembled at the homes of both Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus. There they tried to set fires to their villas, hoping to force the assassins out and into the streets where they could be lynched by the mob. Another group searched for Lucius Cornelius Cinna, the hypocritical former brother-in-law of Caesar, whom the crowd believed to be one of his assassins. The crowd came upon an elderly poet named Helvius Cinna, who was of no direct relation. Mistaking the innocent poet for the sinner they were after, Helvius Cinna was viciously murdered and decapitated. His head was then placed atop a pole and paraded before the group, who proudly claimed to have killed one of Caesar's assassins. In the Forum Romanum, Caesar's corpse had been laid atop the makeshift funeral pyre built by the Roman people. As the flames blazed, soldiers stripped off their armor and weapons, tossing them into the fire. The actors hired to wear the triumphal regalia representing Caesar's victories, along with the professional mourners, all rent their garments and then added them to the flames. Women tore off their jewelry and their children's pendants, tossing them into the raging fire. Others looted law courts and nearby governmental buildings for furniture with which to stoke the flourishing flames. As Caesar's body was cremated in the midst of the hysterical mob, the inferno spread, setting afire several buildings in the Forum Romanum. Using Caesar's funeral as a political podium, Marcus Antonius had successfully weakened the position of the liberators, many of whom fled the city that night, and simultaneously strengthened his own relationship with the people of Rome and with her legions. as Gaius Trebonius fled Rome to take up his proconsulship of Asia, and Decimus Junius Brutus left to take up his propraetorship of Cisalpine Gaul. Both appointments made by Caesar, Brutus, and Cassius, who as city praetors could not leave Rome, disappeared into hiding. Marcus Antonius, who was now master of Rome, went home to his wife. Fulvia Flacca Bambula was the very woman whose actions had incited the mob's burning of the Senate house following the death of her first husband, Publius Clodius, whose corpse had also been carried in the streets by an angry mob, almost as if in a dress rehearsal for the greater drama to come, since she was now the woman who had masterfully coached Marcus Antonius in how to reap the political rewards of the assassination of a populist leader. Like Caesar,